Let's take a look now at the day's business news and possible signs of progress in resolving the trade dispute between the US and China. I feel like I've said that before, Stephen. Stephen Carroll, our business editor, is here to explain all. Stephen.
This is the endless roller coaster that is these talks between the US and China. So in recent weeks, we had an escalation of tensions, but now a new sign of improving relations between Beijing and Washington. The two sides have agreed to high-level talks next month. This announcement came after a phone call between China's Vice Premier and the US Treasury Secretary and Trade Representative. Chinese and American officials will begin discussions in the coming weeks ahead of the ministerial level meetings in October. We shouldn't, though, hold our breath for any immediate breakthroughs. The sides had been close to an agreement back in April before talks fell apart then. And after meetings in August failed to yield any results, the US labelled China a currency manipulator and imposed fresh tariffs of 15% on around $112 billion worth of Chinese goods. Then we had an announcement that President Trump that wanted to increase the levy on goods $250 billion worth from 25% to 30%. And there are more goods that could be facing tariffs later this year, including the likes of smartphones, 15% tariffs on those goods due to come into force in December. Well, with that threat of further escalation still hovering over the world's two largest economies, perhaps unsurprising that the markets are relieved that new talks are going to take place. We've got gains across most of the Asian markets today. The Nikkei in Tokyo up 2%, gains in Shanghai, just Hong Kong there dipping into the red towards the end of its trading day. In Europe, the optimism also spilling over into early trading here. All sectors seeing gains as the markets open. London, though, lagging behind Paris and Frankfurt in its early minutes of trading, of course. Plenty of Brexit news for investors to be discussing there as well. Well, as I was just saying, smartphones are among the products which could be hit by those US tariffs in December. And that's one of the aspects of this dispute that's casting a shadow over the IFA Consumer Electronics Show that begins in Berlin later. In addition, one of the world's biggest smartphone makers, China's Huawei, is facing its own challenges, as Catherine Kadir-Clifford reports.
Tensions in the air ahead of this year's Berlin Tech Show as companies fret over the US-China trade war. The company which looks set to take the hardest hit, Chinese telecoms giant Huawei. US sanctions have banned American businesses from working with the company, putting its latest smartphone on the line. With Google blocked from doing business with Huawei, the Chinese giant's been racing to develop its own operating system in time for the planned release later this month.
A few months ago, we saw Harmony OS, which is the OS they've been working on, but running on a TV. They say they're ready to be able to just implement that on a smartphone, but of course there are other questions that need to be answered. Will there be apps in time? Right now, if they can't get Google, they might not be able to launch that phone.
Smartphones produced in China aren't yet affected by tariffs, though they are set to take a 15% hit from December. But other gadgets like TVs and smartwatches are already targeted. Analysts say it's creating a climate of mounting uncertainty in the tech industry.
We're unsure how everyone will weather the trade war, but there will be winners and there will be losers. If we look at Samsung, they've already pulled their manufacturing out of China to Vietnam years ago. So they may be a winner, whereas Huawei and Apple may potentially become losers.
Some 1,800 companies are set to exhibit at the fair, preparing for scrutiny over how their business is faring in the midst of the ongoing trade war.
As the Brexit drama continues in London, let's check in on what's happening with the British currency. The pound tends to be where investors focus their attention when things are moving politically. Things pretty stable today. The pound trading for $1.22 and just under €1.11. The pound having moved off that 3-year low that it hit in trading on Tuesday. Next, Google is to pay $170 million to settle claims that YouTube collected children's personal data without their parents' consent. The company was fined by the Federal Trade Commission and accused of baiting kids with content to feed its advertising business. Google has promised to work with video creators to label material for children and limit the data collected from those videos, but campaign groups say the penalty isn't enough.
The fine is not nearly adequate enough. It should have been in the billions of dollars. That's what would have sent a message to Google. That's what would have prevented future violations. It's interesting that Google didn't even report the fine that was coming to its stockholders because it didn't even see it as affecting the company's bottom line or its stock price.
Finally, for me, the chief executive of Nissan is to pay back part of his bonus to the company after auditors found he'd been given too much money. The auditors found that Hiroto Saikawa was overpaid to the tune of $400,000. This at a time when profits at Nissan have slumped and the carmaker is cutting more than 12,000 jobs. Saikawa apologised and promised to return the sum, but it comes as the company's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, is awaiting trial on charges that he enriched himself with company money. He denies any wrongdoing. Speaking to journalists, Hiroto Saikawa said that the overpayment was linked to a scheme under the Ghosn era. Eve.
Okay, Stephen, thanks a lot for that. Stephen Carroll there with our business update.